Okay, hello everybody. As Steve said, my name is John Yoon, and I'm the Cloud Operations Engineer at LabKey. So today I'll be going over a basic troubleshooting methodology that I use to troubleshoot LabKey Server and pretty much any technical problem that I encounter. Additionally, I'll also go over some best practices for escalating issues and provide some basic tips to help you resolve your own issues. So let's begin with going over a basic troubleshooting methodology. So these are the 8 general things that I do when it comes to most issues. So the first thing, if you have a problem or if I have a problem, the first thing is to not panic. And also with each of these bullet points, I'll go over them in more detail as we go on. The second thing is I identify and describe the problem. The next thing is I describe the environment that I'm in. The next thing after that is to try to figure out if the problem that I'm looking at is repeatable and persisting. Some issues come up and they'll come up every time you do something. Other times it comes up once or comes up after you do a bunch of little things. So trying to figure that out is super helpful. The next thing I do is I try to play detective and I eliminate or rule out any unlikely reasons for the issue. And I tried my best to focus in on what the root cause could possibly be, or at least get it to a point where I'm able to possibly figure stuff out, or at least pass it off to someone else. The next thing after that is or in conjunction with that, I use the resources I have available to me to try and find solutions. And that can be a variety of things. And then I also use tools to troubleshoot some issues, but tools can be very involved. So many times you actually don't need tools if you can just follow the clues that you have in front of you. And finally, when in doubt, or if I know that I've reached my limit, I escalate when necessary. So let's break this down. So the first thing when it comes to troubleshooting, don't panic. Issues need to be worked in a logical and methodical fashion. If you panic, it just increases the chance of you missing something or overlooking something, or you'll use solutions that aren't really applicable to your particular problem when you investigate an issue. I know it's tempting to throw spaghetti against the wall to try to figure out why, to try to fix something, especially if it's of an urgent nature. But usually taking a breath, taking a step back is the best way to go first before you actually dive into the problem. So the next thing is to actually identify the problem. So you want to be able to summarize the issue and provide relevant details about the problem for yourself and for other people. Throughout this entire discussion, I'm going to actually go over a scenario. So we're actually going to play tech support guy for a sec here. So our scenario here is that a user is unable to log into a website. When they attempt to log in, they get a message that says that their username and password combination is incorrect. So I'm sure we've all been there before. So the next thing is to describe the environment. So for LabKey folks, what are you working on exactly? Are you working on an assay, a study? Are you creating a new file watcher, or maybe editing an ETL, or possibly creating a brand new query? Are you saving a wiki, or updating a message board? Playing in biologics, or a new sample manager? Knowing where you are is extremely helpful. So that way, because one part of the system is different from the next, and you may need to communicate this to someone else. Also, what screen or page are you on? What's the URL of the page? That information is also helpful because it might lead to some clue as to why you're experiencing a particular problem. What version of LabKey are you using? That's extremely important, because if you are using an old version of LabKey, it may be that the problem you're experiencing has been fixed in a new version. So you might want to actually consider upgrading. Or if you upgrade it to a new version of LabKey and something comes up, that may be that the version of LabKey that you installed might actually have some kind of bug and may need to be investigated. And then other technical details, such as your operating system, like Windows machines work differently than Macs, and they work differently than Linux boxes. What database are you using? Postgres SQL works differently than Microsoft SQL, although they're both relational databases. The version of Java and Tomcat that you're on is important because if you're on an old version of Tomcat or an old version of Java, they may not be compatible with what version of LabKey you're using. What browser are you using? IE is no longer supported by many institutions. So if you're using that versus Google Chrome or Firefox, that can create a problem. Or even the type of hardware you're using. If you're using your phone to look at things versus your desktop computer, some sites are not optimized to use your mobile device compared to a desktop. So that's something to also keep in mind. But basically, you just want to get plenty of detail so there's no ambiguity in regards to what you're doing and where you're doing it in. So that way, again, this is for just your own notes and to communicate to other people and also to think through the problem as well. So going back to our user who can't log in, for them, they went to myawesomewebsite.com/login using their Samsung Galaxy phone and using Google Chrome on their phone to try to access the site that they can't get into. So the next thing, is the problem that the person's, you or the person experiencing repeatable? Is it and persisting? Some issues, as I said earlier, only appear one time and then they never come back. Those are really hard to troubleshoot, especially when you can't invoke the same problem again. Other times, and this is usually the case, if you get an error message or you get some weird behavior, you can usually cause that error or problem to come up again, repeating the same steps that you did before to lead to that error or problem. So if an issue appears, try to see if you can reproduce the problem again a second time or even a third time, depending upon what you're doing. If the issue isn't reproducible, do your best to just diagnose the problem by collecting as much information as possible. It may be difficult because obviously if, like, let's say an error comes up and you didn't have time to screen capture it or copy paste the information, try your best to just put down what exactly happened before the error message or before that problem. And maybe that problem might come up again in the future. And by then you might be able to actually say, hey, I ran into that before. I wonder what happened this time. So, and as always, you want to make sure you can communicate this information properly to others. So you want to make sure that you actually can describe how to reproduce this particular issue to other people. So with the user who can't log in, they said it was reproducible and the user is unable to log in from their phone or their computer. So the next thing is we want to rule out unlikely reasons for the issue, and we want to focus in on narrowing down the root cause. So this is where you put on your detective hat and you ask a lot of questions that are relevant to the issue. So is the problem that you're having coming up for everybody or just one person? Has the problem come up before? If so, what was the resolution to that problem? If the problem comes up, if something's changed, what if you change things again? So let's say, for example, you have a file that you are uploading and it's throwing an error message talking about not accepting text information inside a field that requires integers. Well, right there, you can go, okay, well, it's telling me that there is a field that only allows integers or numbers, and I'm putting in text. Where is this text coming from? And try to be able to narrow that down to see, okay, I'm seeing that this spreadsheet I have has a field with a bunch of text in it, but it should be a bunch of numbers. Did I get that file that way, or did my system generate this? What is the, just try to, get closer to what is going on and where this particular problem could be. And then also, if something's changed, what if you change it back? What if you manipulate things to get things to work? That's also a good way to narrow down root causes. And also, if a problem has never come up before and you've done the same exact work and everything's always just going and flowing and something goes wrong and you know that it's, like nothing's changed on your end, nothing's changed about your input files or anything, Was there a change to the system as a whole? Sometimes updates such as server updates, software updates for third-party products can create issues that are unforeseen. And so it's not necessarily always the root cause, because sometimes it can be a red herring and not actually be tied to the issue at hand, but it's something you don't want to rule out until you double check. So with our user here, for them, they were able to log into the site yesterday without any issue. They also tried to log in via their computer using different browsers and also couldn't get in. They verified that they're entering their password correctly. They even tried to use a 5G connection on their phone instead of Wi-Fi to see if it was an internet provider issue. They also tried doing a password reset, but the new password they got also didn't work. And so they actually took the extra step of looking on social media, in this case, Twitter, to see if other people were mentioning the problem, which they did find. So that leads to the next thing, using your resources to find solutions. So is there any kind of helpful documentation available anywhere, like a knowledge base or a support site with docs? LabKey has its own doc site that has a lot of information about LabKey, about various components that LabKey utilizes, and about all of our various modules, along with some troubleshooting tips, tricks, and just a wealth of knowledge. There are also manuals that are available. There's even helper menus within our application and other applications. So if you've ever looked at any input form or any website, you might see little question marks next to certain fields. If you mouse over them or click on them, usually some kind of pop-up menu will appear, and it'll explain what that field is and what it accepts, what it doesn't accept, provides you with links to learn more about that particular field in greater detail. Those are fantastic to look at because sometimes it might be user error as to why you're getting an error message, and that information is super helpful to determine that. Old tickets and forum posts are a great resource as well, because there's a good chance that the issue you're having may have already been encountered before, and there may actually be a solution. So if you have the ability to look at old ticketing systems or old forum posts for the particular product that you're having issues with, you might actually be able to find the answer there. Search engines like Google, Bing, DuckDuckGo, those are also great to look up any particular issues. I personally use Google a lot because there's just a lot of information out there. There's a lot of issues out there, and I am usually never the first person to run into a problem. And so I will search for things and do my best to provide a concise search, or I will copy and paste the first line of an error message and see if anything comes up, and then start digging into the issue a little bit more. And also, in addition to the resources like docs, the logging information and the error messages that you receive from the application are also very helpful as well. Errors usually do a decent job in telling you what's wrong. Some things are easier to understand than others, like if it says can't cast string into integer, that's a given, saying you can't put a string or text value into a number field or an integer field. But some other errors are a little bit more convoluted and may require more investigation or escalation. So with our scenario, our users could not find any documentation on their particular issue about logging in, and they couldn't find any open tickets for public view because not all ticketing systems are public. But according to the website support page, they blogged saying that they did a software update 24 hours earlier. This seems to coincide with the issue that they're experiencing because they were able to log in the previous day, but not today after the update. And so the next thing is using tools that you have available to further troubleshoot the issue. So as I said before, tools are fantastic to use. There are diagnostic utilities within LabKey itself, such as under the admin console, there's the caches page, there is the queries page, there's the loggers page where you can actually enable debugging for various modules and endpoints in LabKey and actions in LabKey to actually have the LabKey log file to actually produce more information that you wouldn't get otherwise. Also, there are tools such as the Google Developer Console that's built into Google Chrome. There's also other tools such as Firebug, which is used for Firefox. There's a tool called Charles Proxy, which can be applied to any application. There's Wireshark and so forth. However, many of these tools are used not initially. They're not used in the very beginning, but they're used only after you've exhausted your first level of investigation. So if you've already looked at logs, you were able to reproduce the issue, you're able to do all the things that you could do and can't figure out stuff, using tools then would be the appropriate way to go, because these tools will then dig in further into the issue, providing more details and so forth. But these tools definitely are not for the beginning user, and I can actually have an entire session to go over how many of these tools work, which we unfortunately don't have time for, but I would love to make some time for this. But just know that most of the time with basic troubleshooting, you don't need to use advanced tools unless you know how to use them and you know what you're looking for. Most of the time, looking at logs, looking at documentation, being able to know how to reproduce a problem is pretty much all you need about 80% of the time. So with this particular issue that the user was having, they actually took it a step further and pulled up the Google Developer Console on their browser, and they decided to look at the network traffic on that website because they weren't sure why they couldn't log in despite putting in the correct password and even doing a password reset. Well, they noticed on the network tab of the developer console that it was displaying a 400 error on a URL that ended in login.api. So right there, that person knew, okay, this is not a problem with me or my password. This is a problem with this website and trying to authenticate me. So this leads to the last thing, escalating when appropriate. If your troubleshooting reached its limits and or time's a factor, so if you have an issue on your plate and it's of an urgent nature that you need this resolved, like you can either try and troubleshoot this yourself or pass it off to someone who does have the time and resources to do it. And so escalating may be necessary. Like this is why LabKey Support is here. This is why your account manager is here. This is why I'm here, to make sure that if you do not have the time or proper resources at the moment to actually investigate something, you would reach out to us to help you out here. But to make sure that we are effective in our jobs, we need to have proper details in your escalation. So when you escalate anything to anybody, you want to make sure that you're making their job a little bit easier, because you are the one who's experiencing the problem. You are the one that has all the information in front of you. So you want to pass that relevant information off to someone else. There's a big difference between saying, I can't log in versus I can't log in with my username and password, and I did a password reset and I verified that my password is correct. Providing details and being succinct about it is super handy, super helpful, and it will speed up the troubleshooting time for the person you're escalating to. So for this particular individual, they, after they did all their troubleshooting from earlier, they decided to open up a support ticket with the website, because at that point they knew that they could not do anything more. And that is the first part of our presentation regarding troubleshooting. So Steve, is there anybody with any questions?
No, although no questions yet, but I do want to invite people to use the chat to, throw in questions as we go, and I'll forward them on to John as, at the end of the session or as appropriate.
All right. Well, I hope that everybody has learned something so far here. So the next thing is, when it comes to troubleshooting, is knowing how to escalate issues to others and how to do it effectively. And so this is just a recap of many things I've said earlier. So how is the best best way to prepare for an escalation? Well, the first thing is you want to get your logs, get information that will help the person who's looking into your issue. You want to provide relevant details on the environment that you're working in. This is helpful for things such as doing step-by-step repros and so forth. Providing full error messages. That's also super helpful because we can actually people can look into those error messages all the way down to the code to figure out what's happening. And also providing a good description of the actual problem itself and being prepared to provide a step-by-step repro. So the first thing, get the log files. We say this a lot at LabKey because many things are logged in our log files, and we've improved our product greatly to where now you can actually get the log files from LabKey itself. Before you had to actually log into the server and access the Tomcat logs directory. Now, if you can log into LabKey, assuming your LabKey server is up, you can, if you have site admin privileges, you can go to the admin console and go to the server information tab and click on the link that says export diagnostics, which will actually give you a zip file that contains the labkey.log file, the Catalina out or Catalina log files. It'll contain memory log files. It'll contain LabKey error log files, and a plethora of other things that are relevant to helping us troubleshoot your issue. Another place that logging information occurs is within pipeline logs, for example, within LabKey. If you do anything such as an ETL or a file watcher, or you're doing a study reload, much of that information is ends up in a pipeline logs section for your particular container that you're in. So if you go into the gear icon, click on go to modules, and then go to pipeline, you will see all the pipeline jobs that have occurred for that particular container. Or you can go into the admin console and actually access a link called pipeline, and it will actually display that information there as well. Pipeline logs will show specifics about what is happening with the import or the loading of information. So that sometimes if errors come up, they'll appear there. And sometimes they'll also appear in the labkey.log file as well, but it's helpful to have that information. There's no such thing as too much information when it comes to troubleshooting, to be honest, or that's my take on it anyway. Additionally, heap dumps can also be helpful as well. Those are generated on the system. So if you have to say that your server crashes because it's out of memory, or you decide to actually log into your LabKey server and run the script to actually trigger a heap dump, that heap dump will actually tell us all the Java information that is going on in that session at that very moment. Heap dumps are pretty big though. They're usually a couple gigs in size. So if you run that, be aware that you have to then get that big, huge file and send that to us, which you can do through your support portal or through other means, which we'll cover later. So the next thing is you want to provide relevant details on your environment. So like I had said before earlier in the troubleshooting phase, what operating system are you running for the actual LabKey server or for your actual computer? Like, are you on a Mac? Are you on Windows? Is your LabKey server on a Linux environment? Which version of Linux? Is it Red Hat? Is it Ubuntu? Is it Amazon Linux 2? Knowing that stuff is very handy because each server environment acts and each desktop environment acts differently. The version of LabKey and Java and Tomcat that you're working with, that's also important because we may need to actually create that same environment or similar one. And so knowing that information helps. What database you're using and the version. So if you're on Microsoft SQL, we may have to actually spin up a SQL environment to use as our database. What browser are you using? I've had issues where Safari would misbehave, but Google Chrome and Firefox would be just fine. What URLs are being accessed? Knowing the URL can be very handy because sometimes it could be an issue where you're in a container that's about maybe 5 levels deep and having an issue, but the issue won't occur on the project level. So knowing that stuff is very handy and helpful, and also tells us what endpoints what endpoint you're likely accessing at the time when you are on a certain page. And also just anything else that seems relevant to the issue. Like I said earlier, there's really no such thing as not too much information. If you think it's relevant, just put it in. If it's not relevant, we will, no one will fault you for putting that information in. Number 3, provide the full error message. So when it comes to error messages, especially stack errors, copying and pasting the full error into a ticket or a text file and attaching it or putting it in an email is ideal. And I know that screenshots are sent, and people drop them into like notepads or Word docs and then send that to us. Screenshots are okay, but they're not ideal, and I'll explain why. Our developers actually analyze the stack error. So developers use things called IDEs, which actually help them work to actually write up software code. And there's a lot of powerful tools within that IDE. And one of the tools is the ability to analyze stack errors. So if we get a copy paste, we can of a stack error, we can copy that stack error and paste it into the IDE, and it will tell us what lines of code the stack error is relating to, and can actually dig into the issue further. Screenshots are, however, not ideal, but if that's what you've done, that's fantastic. Like I said, no information is bad information. Just some information is slightly better than others in certain ways. But yeah, providing the full error message regardless is really important. It is better to show the full error than just one single line. I know that is also tempting to just show the first line of a stack error or just the first line of a message, but having full context is key to better understanding what's happening and troubleshooting the problem. And number 4, providing a good description of the problem and providing a step-by-step repro. So if you have a good problem description that explains what's happening and how it's happening, you can then pass that off to other people who can look at that and go, hey, okay, I know what's happening. I can now proceed to work on this issue. And also a good step-by-step repro will save time and will help lead to faster solutions. So just listing step 1, access this page, step 2, click this link, step 3, upload this file, and just one by one, just listing everything that you've done exactly. So that way there's no ambiguity as to what happened. Because sometimes you may do something that is different than what the next person does. And so knowing how you operate is helpful for the escalation. So with our user who couldn't log in earlier and who escalated the issue, they provided the following in their escalation. They summarized the issue that they were having, saying they couldn't log in. They provided the username for their login. They provided environment information, such as their hardware, their phone, listing their phone and computer information, their operating systems they were using, their browsers they were using, the URLs they were accessing, all of the troubleshooting that they had done previously, including that password reset, and additional information that they found while debugging the website, and also the Twitter posts that they found online of others complaining about the same problem. So this is the type of escalation that I love seeing, because it gives me everything I need to then understand what's happening and also what the individual has done as well. Because I don't know about you, but I get frustrated when people tell me to do something that I've already done. So if I know that you've already done something, I don't have to ask you to do that again. Or if I do, I will give you reasons as to why. But this particular type of escalation is ideal. Any questions, Steve? I don't see anybody asking anything in the chat.
Yeah, no questions yet, but folks, if you have any questions, we have a little Q&A time here.
So this leads to the last thing, key takeaways about troubleshooting. So key takeaways are, number 1, don't panic. You now, I know we went through this quickly, but you now should have a better idea as to how to investigate your problem here. So if you run into an issue, just go through the same methodology that I explained earlier, and you'll be able to actually start digging in your issue. So you got this. You like, everybody is capable of being able to dig into their problems and being able to either solve it themselves, or just sort out what is actually going on, to then pass it off to someone who can help resolve it. Use a troubleshooting methodology and document the issue. So if you go through the troubleshooting methodology and you document what you're doing as you're going, this prepares you for the possibility of needing to escalate the issue. And if you're unable to resolve it for yourself, or to communicate others on what occurred, if you did manage to resolve the issue. Sometimes I will fix a problem and it's a new problem, and I'm like, okay, I need to document this now, because just in case if somebody else runs into the same problem, I need to know, I need to pass this off to others, because I don't want them to go through the same pain that I did in trying to investigate the issue. Take good notes for yourself while working through the issue. So you want to be efficient in your efforts, and you want to make sure you don't go in circles to attempt to resolve your issue. As that old saying goes, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. I know for myself, when I don't take good notes, I will do the same work again and again and forget that I've already done that work before and it didn't work previously. And so I have to like take a step back and go, whoa, okay, let me figure out something else here, because clearly this is not doing the thing that I wanted to do. And know your resources and use them. So what are your resources? Well, in addition to, as I said earlier, your support documentation, your coworkers, your peers, the people that you work with, like sometimes they may be having the same problem as you, or someone may have had the problem previously and they know what's going on now, and so they can help you with your issue if you run into one. Your tech support teams, your vendors are also available to help. LabKey is here to help you as well if you have any technical issues with LabKey. And you just want to leverage the resources you have available to you, because the more resources you can leverage, the faster you can get your issue resolved, and also the more time you save, the more and just headaches that you save from working on issues. Know when to use advanced tools. As I said before, diagnostic tools should only be used after you've initially exhausted your first option. So reviewing logs, reviewing error messages, trying to reproduce a problem, and trying to just look at everything on the first level, on the surface. If you aren't unable to find any information and you know how to use those tools, absolutely go use them. Dig into them, figure out stuff. I'm hoping that in the future we can actually go over these tools in more detail, so that way we can actually show you how to use those properly and know when to use them. And finally, documenting your resolution for the future. So if you manage to resolve an issue and it's not documented, document it, write it down, write down exactly what happened, how it happened, and what you did to resolve it. But if you did resolve an issue and there is a solution for it, bookmark that solution, or just remember it for next time. So that way, if someone else runs into it, you can just send them that solution and say, here, this will take care of your problem. Make sure that when you document your problem and your resolution, that that you do it in a clear, concise way. So that way, if someone needs to search for it, it'll come up again. And also good documentation in general just saves time, it saves money, it saves labor. And so if you've gone through all the work, document that stuff, so that way the next person won't have to go through so much.